Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Would like to welcome everyone today for this session. It's an interesting session, it's an interesting topic. And especially for the Muslims, extremism is always interesting. So we had this interaction with a couple of the SAPOL, especially counterterrorism section, about maybe presentation for the parents. It's an awareness for the parents and for our children about extremism and what's legal, what's illegal. The whole idea about it is an information session where people can understand what's allowed and what's not allowed. And as parents, can actually look into their children and make sure that they are safe and they are doing the right thing all the time. So it's nothing about ISIS or any of these. It's about what's extremism in Australia, what's allowed, what's not allowed. So today we have Ben from SAPOL, and I will just leave for him the mic. Ben?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. It's lovely weather we've got today. It's a real pleasure to be here and appreciate people that have taken time out of their day to come and join us. And also people watching from home, welcome, and hopefully everyone learns something and they can take something away from this. This has been a long time in the making, probably well over a year, I think, since we first met with Principal Hani, and it's gone through several iterations in that time, and I think we're at a stage now where we're pretty happy with the information we've got, and hopefully you as the audience find it useful. But this is actually aimed at students. So initially when Hani proposed that we do a session for parents, I was thinking about making a completely separate presentation. But then the more I thought about it, I thought it was probably more important that the parents would benefit more if they knew exactly what we were saying to their children. So this is exactly the same presentation as what your children will receive later in the week. And so, you'll know what they know, so there shouldn't be any confusion there. In addition to that, at a later stage, probably during the week, we will share an email that'll have some links to resources and definitions and things like that, so the school will be able to then disseminate that to you. Excuse me. Okay, very fortunate today to have to be joined by a couple of other people that have assisted with this process. From my own office, we have Chris Horn. He works with me in the Security Intelligence Unit as part of SAPOL. We have Keith Walter, who's from the Australian Federal Police, and he works in community engagement. And we also have the pleasure of the company of Jamila Ahmadi from the Inclusion Support Program. Did I say your name correctly? So yes, we're very lucky to have them here with us today, and they've also consulted extensively throughout this process and provided a lot of advice and expertise. So this has been very much a joint effort between us as well as the school, and it's a real pleasure to be here and to actually present. A little bit about me. I've been a police officer with the South Australia Police for about 17 years. And for the last almost 4 years, I've worked in the Security Intelligence Unit, which is part of the Counterterrorism and Security section. And my role encompasses a variety of things. One of the, effectively, we have an overarching vision within SAPOL, and that is to achieve safer communities. So that's something that all of SAPOL strives for. But in my office, we have a more particular role, and part of that role is the process of identifying radicalisation. So what is radicalisation? When a person's thinking and behaviour becomes significantly different from how most of the members of their society and community view social issues and participate politically. So I want to emphasise this word here, significantly, because we're not talking about people that are just a little bit different or a little bit quirky or they have a slightly different way of thinking about things. We're talking about people that hold significantly different opinions and views to the rest of society. Only small numbers of people radicalise, and they can be from a diverse range of ethnic, national, political or religious groups. As a person radicalises, they may begin to seek to change significantly the nature of society and government. And we see there again that word significantly. As an example, there was a time when society thought that slavery was a good idea, and at that time it was actually very radical to think that a human should not own another human. Small numbers of people sought to significantly change the nature of society and government, and at that time they were considered to be radicals, and by this definition they were radicals. Hopefully you can see that radicalisation can be a positive or a negative thing. In the example that I've given, it was a positive thing. But in contrast, the kind of radicalisation that we're here to talk about today is the kind that can negatively impact our society and our communities. Here are some statistics provided by the Director General of ASIO, Mike Burgess, at the annual threat assessment earlier this year. In recent terrorism investigations, so approximately the last 12 months, the median age of people being investigated for terrorism offences was 15 years old. 83% of those investigations involved minors who were born in Australia. The majority involve mixed ideology or nationalist and racist violent extremism. And almost none of those were previously known to ASIO or police. All of these statistics are concerning, but I think, certainly from my perspective, the one that is most concerning is the age. Who is it that's radicalising? Australian youth are radicalising. 50% of all recent terrorism investigations involved children who were aged 15 years or younger. 83% of those were Australian born. If that doesn't shock you, it probably should. Almost none of those investigations involved people who were previously known to ASIO or to police, and we need to change this. Signs of radicalisation are not always clear and can vary between individuals. However, research has shown that significant behavioural changes in the following areas are commonly present among people who hold radicalised views. And we see that word significantly again. So we're not talking about just little oddities and strange, peculiar behaviours. We're talking about significant changes. Radicalisation among youth is a growing problem. How can we identify it? Well, here are some of the things that I look for, and Chris, who works in my office, would also look for in the role that we perform. And it's important, I think, that you pay attention to these things, because there's potential that you can identify some of these things in your friends or family members, or your children, your children's friends, and it could indicate that they're radicalising. Firstly, we have ideology, a sudden shift in ideology. Now, ideology can be defined as a set of opinions, beliefs, and attitudes of a group or individual. Changing your opinions, beliefs, and attitudes are a normal part of being human. However, when these changes are sudden, it may be an indication of radicalisation. A promotion of a strict and literal understanding of a given belief. As an example, neo-Nazi groups are often anti-immigration and will spout things such as Australia for the white man. They believe any person who is not of European ancestry should not be allowed to live here. They believe that if they were to control the government, they would deport anybody who is not of European ancestry. Hateful rhetoric, blaming others, identifying an enemy and placing blame for their issues on that group. For example, the immigrants caused this. This is one we've seen recently. There's been at least 2 or 3 protests in recent memory where groups have protested and they have basically blamed immigration for some of the issues and difficulties that society is experiencing at the moment, because they're a soft target. They're easy to blame. Celebrating the actions and achievements of extremist groups. This could take the shape of something like, did you see the news? Did you see all those people that were killed by that guy in that country over there? He did a great job. Moving on to social. We see changes in appearance and demeanour. And again, we're not talking about changes in fashion or little tiny things. We're talking about significant changes. This may include things like a person shaving their head, which, to be fair, I have a shaved head. Generally, I'm growing it for the month of November. Growing a beard, getting a tattoo, drastically altering behaviour. These are the sorts of things that we look for. Pulling away from existing relationships and associating with like-minded groups or individuals. Now, associating with like-minded groups and individuals is a key step in the radicalisation process. Often they will meet and they'll do things like fitness or fight training or religious study, things of that nature. And if it's ongoing, it may indicate that this person is in the indoctrination stage of radicalisation. But what we need to do there is, it's italicised, it's probably a little bit hard to see, maybe not, but pulling away. So it's a very distinct movement of someone withdrawing from their social relationships, removing themselves from their family circles, their friendship circles, because they've got this new group of friends that are influencing their ideology. Conflict with friends and family. So this one goes hand in hand with the one above. Oftentimes when people start to radicalise, they will start to disagree with their friends and family, and it will result in significant conflict and arguments. So as parents, I'm sure all of us have had issues and arguments with our children at times, but this is speaking about really good, strong arguments and ongoing arguments, because this child has started to radicalise and their way of thinking has changed. Criminal activity. Sometimes they'll draw attention to their beliefs. This can involve acts of vandalism, property damage, trespassing, or engaging in violent protest. We see this manifest in things like graffiti at things like mosques, synagogues, churches, temples, trespassing those sites, firebombing those sites, violently protesting in support of beliefs. To be clear here, protesting is absolutely fine. It's a fundamental right in our democracy, but violent protest is not. Threats or acts of violence, threatening violence or committing acts of violence in support of the beliefs. For instance, I hate immigrants, they're ruining the country. Let's go and find some and bash them. These are the sorts of things we look for. For the youth of today, moving on to online signs, this is something that's become more and more important from our perspective and in our role. This is something we watch more and more closely. And as the internet is all pervasive, every child has a phone in their pocket, or they have a tablet, or they have a computer to access. This is something that we're increasingly concerned about. An individual on the path to radicalisation will demonstrate increased secretiveness around their internet use, and they'll spend an increasing amount of time online accessing and looking at extremist content. This may include the following: instructions and training manuals about making explosives or other methods in order to undertake violence. Violent extremist literature images and or video clips that advocate the use of violence or other illegal behaviour to promote a cause. Now, again, this presentation is targeted at your children. So we put lots of examples in to try and help them to understand exactly what we're trying to describe here. When we talk about violent extremist literature, the images, the video clips, the advocation of violence, what we mean is this would include viewing, downloading, and sharing violent extremist content. For instance, this could include videos or other literature produced by ISIS or pro-ISIS individuals, extreme left-wing radical communists, radical political movements, and more. If the content promotes violence or illegal behaviour to promote a cause, it is a violent extremist content. Sympathising or identifying with violent extremist ideology and adopting similar rhetoric. This includes liking, sharing, following, and engaging with creators and channels that produce or display violent extremist content. For example, if a person disliked the ideas and opinions of a political leader and tried to kill that person, and it was all captured on video, clicking like on that video is sympathising or identifying with violent extremist ideology. These are the things we look for. Intense interest in political, ideological, or religious matters, along with increasing anger about issues they feel are unfair or unjust. To be absolutely clear here, having an interest in a political, ideological, or religious matter is not a concern at all, if they are within the boundaries of the law. It becomes a problem when a person develops an intense interest in these things, when they involve illegal matters, such as violent extremist content, advocating for violence, and other similar things. A lack of tolerance to alternate views. So this means that the person who is radicalising cannot deal with the existence of views that are different to their own. If someone disagrees with them, it's a problem. And again, just to reiterate, this is more than just a simple disagreement. This is more than just a child who's angry because they don't want to have to go to bed because of school tomorrow, or they don't want to have to clean their room because they'd rather be playing computer games. This is a disagreement that involves anger and violence and the breaking off of relationships. The radicalisation process is unique to each person who undergoes it, and in most cases it will not cause serious harm. A lot of people radicalise, a lot of them don't go any further than just changing the way they think about stuff. In exceptional circumstances, however, the decisions made by a person radicalising can result in a serious and lethal act of violent extremism. Radicalisation can be bad, but when it becomes violent extremism, it's really bad. And this is what we need to stop. A person who is radicalising is unlikely to exhibit all of the things that I've described here. It will most likely be a combination of some of them. As parents and as educators, we need to be vigilant for these changes. What is violent extremism? The Australian government defines it like this. Click. Acts of or support for violence to achieve social, political, or legal outcomes, or in response to specific political or social grievances. So I really want to focus on that first part of the sentence there, the acts of or support for violence. Because if we substitute almost any other verb in there, it's nowhere near as bad. For instance, if we change that acts or support for violence to holding a fundraiser, we get holding a fundraiser to achieve social, political, or legal outcomes, or in response to specific political or social grievances. You can appreciate that's actually quite a positive connotation. So violence is really the core of what we're looking at here. In Australia, we have the right to hold and respectfully express our beliefs and views. Violent extremism takes those beliefs and it seeks to use fear, terror, and violence to achieve ideological, religious, or political goals. It threatens community safety and cohesion, and there is no place for it here. If someone who has radicalised in their thinking decides that using fear, terror, or violence is justified to achieve ideological, political, or social change, this is violent extremism. All forms of violent extremism seek change through fear and intimidation rather than through peaceful means. Violent extremism has no place in Australia. Countering violent extremism is about preventing violence before it occurs. Countering violent extremism is a long-term challenge. It requires the combined efforts of governments, law enforcement, community groups, academia, and individuals. And this includes you. Our children are going to have experiences and face choices that are pivotal in their development as they age and slowly march towards adulthood. Jamila is going to join us and she's going to share some anecdotes from her childhood and some of the challenges that she faced. Thanks, Jamila. I'm going to move out of the way. Sorry, I'll get out of your way.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. Thank you so much for being here today, especially on a Saturday. I understand everyone has a lot to do. So the reason why I wanted to share my story today is because 25 years ago, my family and I came here in Australia as refugees. So I completely understand as migrants and refugees, we have different experiences in Australia and different experiences around how the media portrays us and things like that. And in my role as a community engagement officer working for the Inclusion Support Program, which is South Australia's Countering Violent Extremism program. So a little bit different to SAPOL because we're not law enforcement. We work in Department of Human Services. So we have a lot of social workers in our team. We have psychologists, policymakers and community engagement who try to work with young people and adults who unfortunately have fallen to the pathway of radicalisation. So I guess I wanted to share my personal story because you can then understand how young people fall into the traps of radicalisation, unfortunately. So as I said, my family and I arrived here 25 years ago. So I was a little kid back then. I was 8 years old. We came from Afghanistan. We lived as refugees in many different countries before coming to Australia. And so when I enrolled in school in South Australia, and it was in primary school, I was genuinely very excited. I thought that I was going to settle and life would become normal. And then my bad luck was that I started primary school just when 9/11 happened. So you can imagine being an 8-year-old girl, you don't understand English very well, it's your second language, 9/11 happened and it was all over the media and the news. And so you're trying to make friends at school, no one wants to become your friend because you're labelled as a terrorist or you're labelled as go back to where you came from, or you both people, go back, right? So unfortunately that's what happened, and hearing those things, it pushed me into a really dark place in my life. I felt like I didn't belong anywhere, I wasn't able to make friends, I felt really misunderstood, like no one was understanding me. I felt that I was very isolated, and I really, really desperately just wanted to make friends and be accepted by everyone in the communities or in the school spaces that I was. So I was very, very vulnerable at a very young age. So in my job now, looking back now in my childhood, I've realized that I carried many of the vulnerabilities that could lead a young person down a path of radicalization. So as I said, I was lonely, I was disconnected, I was searching for identity and belonging. And the difference that kept me safe, I guess, from going towards that pathway is that I, fortunately enough, had really amazing family growing up. I then made some really good friends outside of school who were from the same community. Back then, 25 years ago, also there wasn't a lot of Muslims. So I couldn't really connect with my religion as much either. So, but connecting through those people, it made me feel grounded, valued, and very connected again, right? And so that's why I emphasize this point so strongly, is that people who engage in violent extremism don't just wake up on one day and choose it. It happens because they fall into these fundamental needs in their life, and those needs haven't been met yet in their life. So then they go seek to go into these other groups, and sometimes those other groups are not good people, right? And so again, those young people feel unheard, unsafe, and disconnected. And those groups sometimes also makes them feel heard and seen. And so sometimes those kids, young people, fall into this trap because that group, that bad group, makes them feel seen and heard. Whereas in their normal life, maybe they don't feel seen and heard, unfortunately. And that could be due to many various reasons. And understanding this as parents is vital, because when children get those their needs met early, so that's purpose, identity, belonging, and safety, that doesn't just provide radicalization, it actually builds a stronger community. It also brings the young people to be more resilient in life and to not look for acceptance in other dangerous places, rather acceptance in positive places. So I just thought I'd share my little story with you guys so that you have a deeper understanding of what radicalization, pathway to radicalization looks like, but also that you're here today as positive factors for young people in your lives.
Awesome. Thanks, Jamila. Just put that a little bit higher now. Thank you very much. That was really, really good perspective to have. Okay, so this probably get a little bit boring. Reading legislation is not fun. If you fall asleep, just please try not to snore too loudly. We know what radicalisation is, and we know sometimes that it can lead to violent extremism. We're going to take a look at some state and Commonwealth legislation that relates to it. It's important to understand that the state legislation only applies while we're here in South Australia. And you may, again, this presentation is targeted at your children. So when I'm saying this, I'm saying as if I'm speaking to your children. You may come across people who do some of the things that we are going to talk about, some of these offences, and there is a chance that what they are doing is not an offence where they're from, if they're from a different country or from a different state. So we need to be careful and mindful of that, because sometimes something that is an offence for you and I may not be an offence for that other person who is sharing it, using it or doing it. But we need to understand what the legislation means for us, and we need to make sure that we're complying with it. Okay, so the Summary Offences Act 32B, prohibition of Nazi salute or Nazi symbols. Again, legislation, it gets quite wordy, it's quite hard to understand at times. So what I've tried to do is show you the relevant parts, and then we'll do a little bit of a summary towards the end, just so that hopefully it's really clear. Okay, so Section 32B of the Summary Offences Act. First of all, 32A Part 1 defines a Nazi salute and a Nazi symbol as prohibited acts. And we can see on the screen there, that's a Nazi salute. I'm not going to demonstrate it for you because that would be an offence. And then, of course, the swastika, which I think most people are probably familiar with, but that is also display of the swastika is a prohibited act under this particular legislation. So 32B Part 1 says that any person who engages in a prohibited act is guilty of an offence. The Summary Offences Act 36A, extremist material. Extremist material means material that a reasonable person would understand to be directly or indirectly encouraging, glorifying, promoting, or condoning terrorist acts, or seeking support for or justifying the carrying out of terrorist acts. The example even further, in another country called Lubadub, there is a young woman who shares the young man's ideology. She creates a reaction video to the young man's video, And in the reaction video, she glorifies his actions and she encourages other like-minded people to carry out similar attacks. The material that she has produced is also extremist material. Summary Offences Act 37, possession, production or distribution. A person who, without reasonable excuse, has possession of extremist material or takes any step in the production or distribution of extremist material is guilty of an offence. So again, this is another one that we see quite a lot. I think it's important to really clarify what we're talking about. Possession here can mean that it's on your phone, it's saved on your computer, you printed it out, it's on a USB, it's in your emails, it's in a Discord server. Any step in the production or distribution can mean you've clipped it from a video, you've screenshotted it, you made a meme out of it, or you shared it in person or over the internet. If you have extremist material in your possession, or if you have taken any part in its production or distribution, you are committing an offence. Section 83 CA of the Criminal Law Consolidation Act. Information for terrorist acts. A person who, without reasonable excuse, collects or makes a record of information of a kind likely to be of practical use to a person committing or preparing a terrorist act, or has possession of a document or record containing information of that kind, is guilty of an offence. So this is talking about stuff that would be useful to a person who's planning a terrorist attack. This would include things like instructions for making weapons, like 3D printed weapons, or how to turn this into that, a guide on mixing chemicals to produce a noxious gas. If you have collected or recorded this kind of information, or if you have this kind of information in your possession, you are committing an offence. I understand that reading legislation is challenging. As I said at the start, I'm a police officer, I have been for 17 years. There are times when I fall asleep when I'm trying to read legislation. It can be really hard. So as promised, here's a little bit of a summary for you. It's an offence to use a Nazi salute or symbol. It's an offence to possess, produce or distribute extremist material. It's an offence to collect, make a record of, or possess information of a kind likely to be of use in preparing a terrorist attack. Moving on into Commonwealth. So, as I said at the start, state legislation only applies to us here in South Australia. Commonwealth legislation applies everywhere in Australia. The Counter-Terrorism Legislation Amendment, Prohibited Hate Symbols and Other Measures Act of 2023, which is an act to amend the Criminal Code Act of 1995. That's the actual legitimate title of this act. Sections 80.2E to 80.2M deal with publicly displaying and trading in prohibited hate symbols and giving the Nazi salute. Sections 80.2E to 80.2M describe for us what have been determined to be prohibited hate symbols. So this includes the swastika that we've already seen. You see the Schutzstaffel lightning bolt SS, which is on screen right now, and other symbols that represent terrorist organisations. This will often be something like a jihadi flag or other things of that nature. If you have been paying attention, you will have noticed that there is already state legislation that deals with the Nazi salute and the Nazi symbols. The Commonwealth legislation is similar to the state legislation, but it expands the scope of the legislation to include other symbols that represent other terrorist organisations. So, in summary for Commonwealth, thankfully that wasn't too long, it is an offence to publicly display a prohibited Nazi symbol or a prohibited terrorist organisation symbol, such as a swastika or a jihadist flag. And it is an offence to make a Nazi salute in a public place. What can you do? Feels kind of restrictive. In Australia, every person has the right to hold and express their own beliefs. Individuals are free to seek out new information and ideas about wars, history, conflict, religion, etc. We can't avoid the fact that extremism exists and that horrible things have been done throughout human history. But if we don't learn from our mistakes, we may repeat them. So we should study history, and we should act to correct the wrongs that we see emerging. Sometimes we need to study uncomfortable parts of our history. We just need to be mindful of the boundaries around that. So we're going to go through a scenario. Once again, this is directed at students, so just bear with me and imagine yourself in their shoes. You have been given an assignment about the Nazis in World War II, which you will need to research and reference with sources. Knowing what we know about the restrictions of some of that legislation, how might we go about researching this topic? Can you borrow books from the library, the school library, the Hallett Cove Library, the state library? Absolutely. These books are safe and approved, but it doesn't hurt to ask yourself, is this extremist material? Discuss topics with friends, family, and teachers. Absolutely. Discussing difficult topics is okay. Everyone has different life experiences, and sharing perspectives builds understanding. But it doesn't hurt to ask yourself, is this person condoning acts of terrorism? Watch documentaries, news, and investigative journalism. Absolutely. But it doesn't hurt to ask yourself, is this source justifying acts of terrorism? Conduct research online. Absolutely. However, know that this is the one that is most likely to end up with you as a student looking at things you shouldn't be looking at. If you find yourself on the dark web, if you find yourself browsing obscure websites and sifting through unmoderated Discord channels, you should ask yourself these questions. Is this extremist material? Was this produced by a terrorist organisation? Is this information of a kind likely to be of practical use for a person preparing a terrorist act? Look for credible and trustworthy sources. The purpose of this legislation is not to stop people from learning. Education is of the utmost importance. I think we're sitting in a school, as I say this, I think we can all agree education is important. But so is critical thinking. You can learn about these ideologies without engaging with them. When you are conducting online research and engaging with others online, think about these following principles. The 4 R's of online safety. First of all, respect. Who has heard the golden rule to treat others how you would like to be treated? It's pretty common sense. We should all be practicing this principle in every aspect of our lives, online and offline, and it should underpin our every interaction. Show respect to others, but also to yourself. Behave in such a way that you would be proud for your family or your teacher to witness. Try to leave every situation a little bit better than when you found it. You are not as anonymous as you think if you wouldn't say or do something in public, should you be doing it online. This is a great rule of thumb. Don't be fooled into thinking that you are anonymous. Every single click and every single key press leaves a trail. If you are online, you are not alone. You can and you will be found. Responsibility. Responsibility should be taught from the first swipe of the iPad. You are, as students, the most tech-savvy generation to exist. You are more connected and you have access to more information than at any other generation before you. This is a massive responsibility. Your online behaviour will pave the way for future generations. You have the opportunity to shape the online world positively for generations to come, to leave a legacy. This is a responsibility that should not be taken lightly. You could be the reason someone else has either a good or a bad experience. You can be the difference between a positive or a negative online experience for those around you. Be vigilant, both online and offline. Be responsible and be a good influence. Reasoning. Ask yourself this. Is it credible? Is it true? Is it biased? It can often be difficult to step back and process whether information you see online is credible or true, whether it's an out-of-character snap, shady advertising on Insta, or a tweet trending on X. It's crucial that you stop and you question. As we've already said, you are the most tech-savvy generation, but you are also incredibly susceptible to falsehoods. So you need to be discerning and you need to think about what you're seeing, what you're hearing, and you need to challenge it and not be a sheep. With the rise of AI and misinformation, it is important to question and discern information. As AI and machine learning technologies continue to advance, it will only become more difficult to discern what is real and what is not. Be vigilant and keep on the lookout, exercising your reasoning skills and stay sharp. If something feels off, you should lean into that instinct. Critical reasoning is a skill you can use in all aspects of life. It's imperative at this stage of your life, as you head towards adulthood, it's imperative to cultivate critical reasoning skills now so that you're able to call out the bad stuff, but also to shout out the good stuff. And finally, resilience. At some point, you will experience nasty comments or inappropriate content. Unfortunately, you are all bound to witness or experience these things. And in fact, I'd be surprised if most, if not all of you, have not already experienced it to some degree. Develop strategies. Ignore, disengage, dismiss. Blocking or limiting your online access is not going to build the strength and resolve you need to withstand this potential online onslaught. You will come across trolls, scammers, bullies. You need to learn to ignore, to disengage, dismiss, and even report this behaviour when you see it. Persist, adapt, and change in the face of adversity. Develop solution-focused coping strategies to ensure you can bounce back from tough situations, online and offline. These are skills that will be useful to you for your whole life. So if you think someone's radicalising, what do you do? We've looked at the markers of radicalisation, and if you believe that you've recognised these in friends or family or people that you know online, what should you do? Well, quite simply, there's an old saying that prevention is better than a cure. If you have concerns, you shouldn't hesitate to report them. Quite simply, as I've said, prevention is better than a cure. It is vitally important to stop people before they commit acts of violent extremism. There are pathways back from radicalisation, which Jamila has very kindly touched on for us. Countering violent extremism programs are available, and they aim to assist people to turn away from extremism. There is no harm and no foul. So what this means is if you report your suspicions and it turns out to be nothing, nothing bad happens. If it turns out to be something, then you may have helped stop an act of violent extremism, or you may have helped a friend or a family member get help in dealing with radicalisation. The emphasis is on correcting behaviour, not disciplining people. I know standing here as a police officer, you might not believe me. Truth be told, I haven't arrested someone in probably about 8 or 9 years. Our focus is on identifying who's radicalising and then getting them in touch with organisations such as Jamila's so they can get some help. Remember that prevention is better than a cure. If someone can be helped in turning away from extremism before they do anything bad, then that's the best case scenario. Once a person commits an act of violent extremism and hurts others, there's really no easy way back. So, as I've already alluded to, there are a number of ways that we do try to correct behaviour. First of all, we have the inclusion support program. And Jamila, do you have a little bit to say for us?
So as I said before, the Inclusion Support Program is basically South Australia's program that helps young people who may be at risk of being involved in violent extremism. Our program is slightly different to everyone else in Australia, because everyone else in Australia, what happens is law enforcement does the case management. They do everything from A to Z. In South Australia, it's very different. What happens is we get referrals either from the South Australia Police or we get referrals from Department of Education, right? So those referrals come in and we look after the young people or adults who come into our program. So it's a voluntary support services. So it's actually voluntary. It's not. They can come in or leave whenever they want, and it starts from the age of 10 and above. We help basically make safe and positive changes in their lives. Some people might feel isolated, angry, or withdrawn to those harmful ideas and behaviours. So ISP works not only with the individuals but also their families too. And we connect them with the right sort of support services that they also require. So we have a brokerage system. And this might also include, for example, counselling, special assessments, help with school or work, building stronger relationships with their communities and also home. The program, as I said, is delivered by Department of Human Services here in South Australia, and it's actually partly funded by the Australian Government initiative through the National Support and Intervention Program, also known as NSIP. So who do we work with? We work with basically schools, we work with health services, we work with law enforcement, basically anyone who can assist or support this young person in basically meeting their needs in life. Our aim is to reduce harm, empower positive change for the young person, and our aim is to basically keep all South Australians safe from ideologically and politically motivated forms of violence. In my role, I mainly focus on the prevention side of things, so countering violent extremism. It's not violent extremism. So in my role, I manage basically community capacity buildings and making sure that the communities are aware of such things, so that when it does appear at schools, unfortunately sometimes, or outside, that you're aware of this basically countering violent extremism program. So yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jamila. All right, we're almost done. So thank you very much. I actually forgot to click that slide. My apologies. So just a couple of points there for those who are watching at home as well. But it's a really good program, and as stated, their aim is to reduce harm, empower positive change, and keep all South Australians safe, which is a very noble cause. One of the other options that we have as well is the youth justice system. And their motto is children and young people in the justice system are inspired to change and positively participate in their community. Sometimes when we receive a report, it leads to someone being arrested and put through the youth justice system. And in extreme situations, it can result in people going to jail. This is actually very rare, particularly for juveniles. Whether a person goes to jail or not, the desired result is the same. The aim of the entire process is rehabilitation, to help that person to change and become a contributing member of society. So to reiterate one of the first slides we looked at, violent extremism has no place in Australia. Countering violent extremism requires the combined efforts of governments, law enforcement, community groups, academia, individuals, and you. So what should you do? If you think you see it, if you hear someone talking about it, if you read a social media post about it, you should report it. Talk to your parents, talk to a teacher, talk to a wellbeing officer. If you're not sure, report it. There's no harm and no foul. You can remain anonymous, and your safety is our highest priority. If we investigate someone because a report was made, that person will never know that you are the one that made it. If there are no issues, nobody gets in trouble. If we identify that a person has radicalised, then your report might have helped to save lives. If you think you might need to report, here are some of the options. So first of all, the National Security Hotline. You can email them, you can call them, you can send them a text message, and you can remain completely anonymous. South Australia Police, 000 if it's an emergency, 131 444 if it's not urgent. And the Step Together program. This is a federally funded program, which is very similar to the inclusion support program. And you can make reports to them, and then they can set things in motion. Do we have any questions?
Thank you very much, man.
You're welcome. Yeah, absolutely.
So you talked about, what sort of materials children engage with online. And if I think about it, like, streaming services, I can put a PG lock on it, kids can't watch stuff on a certain way. Explicit content, I can limit that on my server. And the government is bringing in these new rules where kids have to provide, everyone has to provide an ID if they want to get on those social websites. So who does all this lie on? Does it lie on me to make sure what my kids are watching is safe? Or does it lie with the government and the regulatory authorities to make sure that that sort of material, how to make a bomb, extremist videos are not actually available to my children? Who does the onus lie on?
That's a really good question. I think, to be fair, it's probably a bit of both. As parents, we need to be invested in our children, and we need to be monitoring what they're doing, because they are children, their brains are developing. Sometimes they don't appreciate the gravity of what they're doing or what they're looking at. So it is really important that we monitor and keep an eye on what they are doing, especially online, because it's just so easy for them to access material. The government will take steps to identify and remove content where we're able to, but sometimes we're simply not able to because it's hosted overseas and we lack any legislative power to remove stuff. For instance, there was something when there was a church in Sydney and the youth stabbed the priest that was there. I don't know if you recall that, going back about a year ago. The Australian government tried to get that video of that taken down because that's video of a violent act, so it then comes under extremist material. Because the video was hosted by an overseas company, they basically refused. They said, no, we're not going to remove that. So
with regards to that, are there some online tools that you can give us players that how we can block explicit content of sexual nature on our own servers?
Yeah.
Can we somehow block this sort of content on our own?
Yes. Do you have?
Yes, absolutely. The E-Commissioner website, Commonwealth Government, E-Commissioner, has all that material on there to help you with.
Okay.
The Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation, and there's more material that you can. There is internet devices where you can control what sites come into your home. The issue is some of the stuff that's hard to stop is your encrypted applications, like your WhatsApps and all those type of applications. They're the ones that are hard to control. But I totally recommend that the E-Commissioner website, Commonwealth, there's a lot of links and a lot of material on that.
Thanks, Keith. Yeah, we'll put that link in the email before we send it out to make sure everyone's got access to that.
But it's a good question.
Yeah, it was.
It really is, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you talked about radicalization, and just thinking about the symptoms that you were telling. So I am not a mental health professional. I'm not a mental health officer.
Yep.
But the things you were telling someone, it sounds like someone going through a bipolar episode. So how do I, like, my kids are young, but once they're grown up, the way I was raised, it was always the first priority was to protect your kids.
Mm-hmm.
My parents would think, oh, if my kid is doing something wrong, we can fix him. But if I report my kid to someone, he's going to be on some sort of watch list for life, and that's going to ruin his life, his chances to excel in life. So how do you balance these things? Like, how do you determine, radicalization versus mental health versus prioritizing your children's future versus prioritizing, their thoughts now?
Yeah.
Is there any comments on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, a really good question. To be honest, sometimes mental health can look very similar to radicalisation. And that, again, that's part of that process that we work through and try to identify other markers that would indicate someone's radicalised. A big part of that is often we would seize electronic devices and we would go through them. And in most situations, we'd end up finding extremist material or something like that to obviously back up our theory that they perhaps were radicalising. If it's a mental health episode, it's probably equally important that they get some help anyway. So that's something that we can refer. There's another program that we work with called the Fixated Threat Assessment Centre, and that's teamed. That's a team full of mental health professionals and psychologists, psychiatrists, mental health nurses, etc. And they can actually make their own assessment and then make further referrals from there. So as far as having a record that follows you around, if a person committed some of these offences, they potentially would go through a court process and then potentially would receive a judgment from the court saying that, yes, we agree that you have committed these offences. Youth justice is very different from adult justice, though. Youth justice, as I said, the focus is very much on rehabilitation because we want kids to be as safe and healthy as possible so that they can become functional adults. And because they're still developing, it's the best time to do that. Once people are adults and they're already criminals, it's very hard to modify their behaviour. So there definitely is a, throughout the youth justice system, there is an intention to not impact a child's life so much so that it changes the future of their existence. We want them to recognise what they're doing is wrong, but we want them to change their thinking to be acceptable in line with the rest of society. Unfortunately, there are very rare situations when kids just don't ever want to change. It is incredibly rare, but I think statistically, people who radicalise, you probably have a better idea than me, Jamila, but it is actually quite common for people just to eventually change their mind and swing back to what we consider normal. So.
Yeah, what we tend to see in our caseload or case management. Can you hear me? Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Do you want the
mic? So what we typically see in our program is that you're right. It is kind of parents are fearful that their kids might click on the wrong link, or it might happen once or twice and they get charged. I guess prevention, like we said, prevention is better than everything else. But in terms of case management, the sort of clients that we see is that they start from the age of probably 10 and above, and they usually de-radicalize probably by the age of 18. So it kind of just slows down. And that happens for various reasons, of course, and everyone's case is different. But what we notice is that when they're going through, I guess, as teenagers, they're trying to find their identity, they're trying to find that sense of belonging, like I mentioned before. And so if they are able to do that in a positive way, then that's fine. But unfortunately, if they do end up in the wrong groups, but they will realise once they grow as adults that they tend to let go of those bad groups. Because then they cling on to full-time employment, and they will cling on to other positive groups and things like that. So usually, and if they do go through youth justice, again, there are really good programs with them to become radicalised, and we've seen some really positive cases in the last few years. I can share one case from many years ago. We had a lady in our program who was unfortunately radicalised by a group of other people overseas online. We've worked with her for 3 to 4 years. Now she's obviously, she really regrets what she had done. And she always says if I could share my story with other young people, I would, and say that that was a wrong decision when I made it when I was a teenager. She's now a successful nurse in another state, so.
I guess there's a fine line with terrorism, and we've got to ride that all the time. For example, Nelson Mandela was classed as a terrorist, Sinn Féin was classed as terrorists, and they're in governments in their part of the country, right? There is obviously a lot of emotion along with Palestine within our community as well as broadly in Australia. I know I've seen in the rallies that there are lots and lots of ordinary Australians out there as well. So how do we manage this from our perspective? Because there's a natural kind of feeling that's going to be associated with this, that we can't just, I mean, all we can do is talk about it, not act, and make sure that our kids are open about it with us. But I see a future where maybe Hamas will not be terrorists. They might be classed as government at some point, or Hezbollah. So it's a really fine line, and of course you've got a very hard line to find mostly like the United States.
Yes, thank you. That's a good question. So many good questions. I only charge $5 per question. So, so ASIO is the organisation at a national level who decide, or they advise the government who they think should be listed as a terrorist organisation, and that's based on a lot of factors that probably I'm not even privy to be completely honest. We do share a lot in common with other Western countries in terms of what organisations they have listed as terrorists, but then at the same time there's other organisations that we don't recognise as terrorists. For instance, I think Canada proscribed the Proud Boys as a terrorist organisation, whereas here they were just a group of racists that we just sort of hassled until they stopped meeting together. So it's definitely something that is led by the federal government. It's led by a lot of analysis and a lot of information that's shared between our government with other groups in the Five Eyes family, so the US, Canada, UK, New Zealand. I don't know exactly what the protest entails, but certainly there are situations where groups are considered to have legitimised, and as such that terrorism the terrorism listing has been removed. And in fact, I was just speaking with Hani earlier about Kurdistan, the Kurdistan Workers' Party. And I don't know if they have been delisted yet, but I know there was conversations around that because they've certainly made attempts, similar to Sinn Féin, they've made attempts to legitimise themselves and have a political focus and sort of stop violent actions. So
within the domestic market, the movement, the SHA movement, is a really serious problem in South Australia. But I guess it's not classed as terrorism, but the fact is it's a mobilised group of people that do favour hurt people and are a public nuisance, so they generally would be a terrorist, but because of their age, they probably aren't.
No, sometimes there's some very fine distinctions. Really, for it to be considered terrorism, there needs to be an ideological factor to it, whether that's political or religious or something else. A lot of the times with these sorts of groups, they're just up to no good. They're just full of mischief, hanging out with their mates. They think it's funny or whatever, and so in that case, it would be a different area would be focused on those guys.
It's not just having fun with mates. I've actually seen people assault.
Yeah, some of them are very, very not good. You're more than welcome. It was a very good question. Yeah.
I have a suggestion. For your slides,
Yeah.
actually it would be nice if we can add an example. For example, kids, they work on projects.
Yep.
So we can add like example. For example, they can work on rockets, building a rocket.
Yeah.
But they cannot work on this building I don't know, a bomb or something.
Yeah.
So that would be nice if we can add an example for the kids that
Absolutely.
search online for this material.
Yeah. Make that distinction between this is a legitimate educational purpose.
example.
Yeah. No, I think that's very valid. So I appreciate that. We'll definitely put that back in there. And I think anything we can do to make this easier for kids to digest and easier for them to relate to, I think is absolutely well and truly worth putting in. So I'm very much open to positive criticism. So.
And one more thing. We need to make our kids aware that, for example, if they want to search something on the internet for a project, they need to make their teachers aware that I want to work on, for example, building a rocket or something. So this is the point we need to communicate as well in the slides.
Yeah, I think that's valid. Like, yeah, if we can impress upon them that educational stuff is more than okay, and if you can justify it, even sometimes, like we get, particularly with kids who are on the spectrum, they often will kind of hyper-focus on stuff, which is fine, but sometimes they hyper-focus on extremist material, which is not fine. So, yeah, I think there's an important distinction there. We would just go, oh, he liked a video about a war documentary, that's fine, that's not an issue. But if we looked at a child's computer and they've got tons and tons of videos about all these atrocities and then they've got instruction manuals on how to make stuff, then obviously that would be taken into consideration. And so you would go, all right, on the balance of probabilities, on one hand, this person just likes documentaries. On the other hand, this person is watching a documentary that may, in and of itself, not be extremist material, but when you compare it or consider it alongside all the other stuff that they're looking at, it's an ideological factor. So,
Can I add one thing to that?
yeah.
And it also dictates where you have gone to find that material. There's certain parts within the internet that you need to have a certain anonymity to get into these areas. So if you've actively looked to go into these areas and say law enforcement know about these areas and you're looking at stuff, that could be a concern. But doesn't mean you're going to be guilty of that offence though. I think that he articulated that very well. There will be an investigations process, but oh yeah, you're right. Someone might say, why is this name like this one, which is shown on this extremist material website? You're dead
That
right.
makes sense, thank you.
Yeah.
So in a nutshell, it's not every like is an offence.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
If it's accompanied with other things that from an ideology, that's what they look for.
Can I just say, like, now that we're talking about all the terrorism, etc., I think after this, my phone is going to suggest me to watch all of them.
Yes.
Of course,
Yes.
that's
Yes.
AI.
And then I'll be watching it, and then it keep coming, and I keep watching and watching. So I don't want to be an offender.
I'll take your name down later. I'll scrub you off the list. So yeah. Just before we go as well, this video, if it's not clicked with a like, then I'll be very disappointed. So